When you're ready.
The ethics of CRISPR. Should we experiment on the human genome? I'm going to be answering this question through scientific, social, cultural, and ethical lenses. My solution to this question is that it's ethical to use CRISPR if it grants someone fundamental capacities that they otherwise wouldn't have had. But if it is to modify someone or give them desirable traits, then it is unethical. The first thing that needs to be understood when answering this question is the difference between somatic and germline gene editing techniques. This is important because the difference could be the difference between ethical and not. Somatic gene editing is an alteration in one specific part of someone's DNA. This alteration cannot be passed down to future generations, whereas germline editing is an alteration in gametes or embryos. It affects all of their cells and can be passed down to these generations. This is an image of somatic gene editing that changes a sickle red blood cell to a normal red blood cell. As you can see, an A is changed to a T, therefore changing the RNA and the protein that it codes. When looking at ethic and social perspectives of CRISPR, it is important to think about the safety. A quote from What Are the Ethics of Genome Editing says, as of 2014, there were about 40 countries that discouraged or banned research on germline editing, including 15 nations in Western Europe, because of ethical and safety concerns. This further supports the fact that germline editing is too new, and we don't know all the possible personal and social effects it could have. A question that is often asked when determining the ethics of something is, what is the purpose? So, what is the purpose of gene editing? Is it to save someone's life from a life-threatening disease, or is it to create a designer baby? Another factor to consider when determining the ethics are the 4 principles of bioethics. These 4 principles include autonomy, benefice, non-malfice, and justice. Autonomy originates from the ethical principles of dignity and freedom, meaning that this patient should be treated with a full understanding of what is happening, and their consent, or the informed consent of their parents. Benefice and non-malfice go hand in hand. Benefice states that whatever is being proposed should have a good outcome, and non-malfice is the prevention or trying to avoid harm. The principle of justice states that the patient should have the right to a fair, minimum level health care, and resources are distributed equally and fairly if necessary. Germline gene editing does not go along with these principles because there isn't enough information to properly inform a patient. Another conflict is that society and scientists don't know if gene editing would be for everyone or if it would only be for the rich, further creating a social divide. As said in What Are the Ethical Concerns of Genome Editing, some worry that taken to its extreme, germline editing could create classes of individuals defined by the quality of their engineered genome, like we saw in the movie Gattaca. This bar graph is from the public perception of human applications of CRISPR gene editing. And as you can see, the highest approval percentage rate are from people who are not religious, whereas the lowest approval percentage rate are from adults who aren't parents. Matthew Lau is a bioethicist at NYU who discusses certain conditions that are needed for someone to have a good life. He calls these fundamental capacities. An example of fundamental capacities are the ability to move, to think, to have emotions, and so many more. These fundamental capacities guarantee someone a good life. CRISPR has the potential to give someone who previously would not have access to these fundamental capacities the chance at one of those good lives. He created 4 principles which can be summed up to say, having a child knowing that they wouldn't have access to these fundamental capacities is unethical. And if there's a child who already exists who does not have access to all of these fundamental capacities, then it is unethical to try and not change their situation, giving them an equal opportunity. As he says in one of his books, the basic idea is that if we think about what human beings need in order to pursue a good life, maybe from there we can generate some principles that can guide us in reproductive genetic engineering. Thank you.
What's some evidence that you gathered that you didn't include, and why did you choose not to include it?
So I found some evidence about gene editing that you can do at home. So like a take-home kit, kind of like do it yourself. But it wasn't relevant to any of my lenses, even though I found it extremely interesting.
Okay. What additional questions emerged from your research, and why are they important?
So originally I was just focused on like the ethical lens. I wasn't really thinking about the scientific lens too much, or how germline and somatic gene editing came to be. So I started wondering like, oh, well, why is somatic okay and germline isn't? So then that's why I kind of explained it in the beginning, just so people had like an overall view of what's happening and why it's not ethical.
Okay, thank you. Another round of applause.